Assalamu alaikum, Mahuaft Hamgavit, Qadabtkham Zajmi.
We continue broadcasting our Uncertain Regard series in our native language. Today my guest is the Secretary General of the Circassian Federation of Turkey, Tsey Yılmaz. Hello, Yılmaz. Welcome to the air.
Walaikum salam, Idemir. Thank you for the opportunity. I would like to sincerely and warmly welcome all our viewers and listeners.
Yılmaz, most of our audience is, in one way or another, familiar with the activities of the Circassian Federation. Your organization made a strong public statement, if I'm not mistaken, back in 2013. So that everyone has a clear understanding, how do you personally define your mission? Looking back at the path you've taken, what key changes have taken place within the Federation, and what role does it play in the Circassian Diaspora? Today, I'd like to start with that.
The Circassian Federation, as you correctly pointed out, was established in 2013. I myself took the position of Secretary General in 2015, and since then I have continuously been part of the organization's leadership. At first, the Federation brought together only 4 societies. Today, it already includes 16 organizations, and the main office is located in Istanbul. Of course, we keep cultural and educational projects in focus. However, our fundamental position is that the Circassian issue cannot be solved solely through dance and folklore. It requires mature social and political activity. That's why we position our work as political. Wherever important events for our people take place, we strive to participate and assert our agency. The local societies that are part of our structure take on practical tasks like preserving the language, developing culture, and helping our compatriots. But when it comes to the central leadership of the Federation, most of our agenda is focused on the political and legal aspects of the Circassian issue, regardless of where the Adige people live. If we look at our results, we've tripled in size over these years. If you compare us to other older federations in Turkey, it's important to understand a key nuance. When you get involved in real politics and call things by their proper names, a lot of people start to distance themselves. For most, it's more comfortable to stay within the safe boundaries of cultural events. Nevertheless, whether there are many of us or just a few, we actively and successfully engage with everyone who shares our strategic views. Circasfed is always ready to support any useful national initiatives around the world. We understand that different people and organizations may have their own views, and it's impossible to force everyone into a single mold. But where our interests align, cooperation is not just possible, it's necessary. Our doors are open for open dialogue.
I should make a clarification here. There are far more issues that require our attention than can fit into a single program. Many topics deserve their own in-depth episodes, so today we'll only touch on a few of them, and we hope you won't refuse to talk with us again in the future. I'd like to start with the events surrounding the Day of Remembrance on May 21st, specifically with the situation in our historical homeland. We've all seen the difficulties and pressure activists in the Caucasus face this year. And it's important to note here that, frankly speaking, Circasfed is one of the few organizations in the diaspora that doesn't stay silent and isn't afraid to openly express its position on socially significant issues back home. At the same time, among Circassians abroad, there's often an opinion that, in order not to harm compatriots in the Caucasus, it's better not to react to sensitive political topics. We often encounter this kind of position, including in the public sphere. Why do you think this approach is mistaken? And what difficulties have you personally faced in your work because of your stance?
Before we talk about the challenges, let's look at the overall trend, May 21st. If we look back 10 or 20 years, the Day of Remembrance and Genocide, in the past, Circassians never gathered such a massive number of participants around the world. But today, in Turkey alone, memorial events are held in almost every major city, district, and even in remote villages. And this trend is clear all over the world. In Europe, the US, Israel, Syria, and Jordan. No matter what country Circassians live in recent years, this day has been observed everywhere and on a large scale. What does this tell us? It shows that Circassian self-awareness is awakening, that this inner spirit is breaking free. For many decades, Circassian communities silently carried the heavy consequences of a national tragedy within themselves. But today, we live in an era of modern technology, which brings tremendous benefits. Our people, scattered all over the world, have finally gotten the chance to see each other, instantly exchange information, coordinate our thoughts, and hear the voices of our fellow tribesmen from thousands of miles away. Here in Turkey, we know in real time what's happening on the streets of Maykop, Nalchik, or Cherkesk. It's no longer possible to hide or isolate the truth. Thanks to technology, the world has become absolutely transparent. Everything is completely transparent now. As for the situation back home this year, the news about restrictions, bans, and pressure on activists has deeply saddened us. Here in Istanbul, we've established ongoing coordination with the leaders of 21 Circassian organizations. We meet every month. Of course, we urgently discuss the bans on holding mourning processions in the Caucasus and the cases of direct intimidation of the population by law enforcement. We did not stay silent. Turkisfed officially sent letters to the ambassador of the Russian Federation in Turkey, as well as to the heads of the Caucasian republics. In these appeals, we stated directly that we are deeply concerned about the situation. These bans are absolutely unfounded and contradict the laws and the constitution of Russia itself. What reason did local officials give? They cited security concerns. Supposedly, because of the current military situation, large gatherings of people are dangerous. A drone could strike or a bomb could fall. But hold on, if this were a general, consistent practice across the whole country, that would be one thing. But literally just 2 weeks before that, on May 9th, Victory Day was celebrated on a massive scale all across Russia. People came out into the streets in huge numbers. Back then, there was no threat of bombings. In that case, the military actions didn't get in the way of safety. And what's even more absurd, officials claim that marching on the roadway is a security threat. But if people walk on the sidewalk, the threat magically disappears. We believe it is absolutely wrong when legal norms are interpreted selectively. I don't know for sure whether our official appeals influence the decision to at least allow activists to walk on the sidewalks, but I am convinced that our response and drawing international attention are beneficial, and they certainly don't hurt anyone. In Istanbul, on the Day of Remembrance, I spoke from the podium and, as usual, openly listed everything that happened to our people during this war. And speaking the historical truth should not automatically be interpreted as a provocation or as confrontation with Russia. We are well aware of Russian legislation and international constitutional norms. We study them in detail as part of our legal work. And we demand only one thing, that Russia abide by its own laws, which contain many useful declarations. Unfortunately, when it comes to practical implementation on the ground, these legal norms are switched off, taking on a completely opposite, discriminatory meaning. We see this firsthand. At the same time, we realistically assess the situation. Circassians live in different countries and everywhere face the specifics of local political systems. Here in Turkey, we are also limited by local laws and can't do absolutely everything we want. There is a constitution here, strict boundaries of our own, which we are not allowed to violate. We have to respect these rules so as not to put the masses at risk of forceful repercussions. Moreover, as soon as Russia and Turkey start getting closer and finding compromises, this immediately has a negative impact on Circassian activism here. For example, just a few years ago, we used to hold large-scale marches down the main street, Istiklal, right up to the building of the Russian Consulate General in Istanbul. This is a traditional area for demonstrations designated by the state. But as Russian-Turkish relations grew stronger, we started facing strict restrictions of this location, and eventually, holding rallies on this street was completely banned. We're not planning to blindly clash with the police and put thousands of our compatriots at risk of getting beaten. The law is the law, and Circassians respect the rules of the countries they live in. But there's a fundamental difference between the situation in Turkey and the situation back home. In Istanbul, this ban on holding rallies isn't the norm. The ban on rallies on Istiklal applies to absolutely everyone, Turkish parties and any other groups. There's consistency here. But when we look at Nalchik, we see double standards. On May 9th, mass rallies are allowed, but on May 21st, they're not. If in Turkey we face a violation of the principle of equality, we have a legal tool. We can go to court. But I don't think such a legal mechanism for self-protection really exists today in the historical homeland. There are big questions about that. Maybe I'm missing something. You can add or clarify if you think I haven't answered something.
I named our segment a special perspective specifically so that the guest could speak absolutely freely, without censorship or restrictions, fully revealing the depth of their thoughts. I'm listening to you with great interest. I had planned to smoothly transition to discussing processes in the diaspora after talking about the situation in the homeland. But in essence, you've already combined these two spaces into a single picture.
I want to add a crucial point on this topic. Today, against the backdrop of behind-the-scenes agreements and rapprochement between Turkey and Russia, the Circassian issue and its problems, the Adiga must in no way become a tool for serving their geopolitical interests. The Circassian factor should not be used as a bargaining chip on their common table. We must be guided solely by our own national interests, by what truly benefits our people. If we break the law somewhere, the state apparatus will respond instantly. But our civic responsibility is to respond just as quickly and firmly to any infringement of our legal rights by the state itself. Unfortunately, whenever an honest voice is heard in the Circassian world, people immediately panic. If you criticize Moscow's actions, you're instantly branded as anti-Russian. If you criticize Ankara, you're labeled anti-Turkish. That's absurd. Our right to protect our identity is guaranteed by the laws of the countries we live in. We need to make use of these rights.
In the Circassian community, there are periodic debates about how much people actually care about the memorial events, May 21st. Some say that fewer people are getting involved. Others, on the contrary, see a rise in participation. How do you see this trend? You?
If we analyze the trends of the May 21st events, I would recommend not focusing on the dry numbers of people in a single square, but rather on the rapid expansion of the geography, which I mentioned earlier. The remarkable fact is that this year, standing before the monument with Ademir, we realized we truly had no idea what our own national flag even looked like back then, which is quite a shocking thing to admit now. And today's youth, even if they have some real gaps in their knowledge of their native language or the finer points of etiquette, know their history very well. A new generation of Circassians is growing up with a true Adig spirit and backbone. Today, there are about 200 Circassian organizations operating in Turkey. In cities, in district centers, and villages. If we set out to forcibly bring them all together in one hypothetical place like Samsun or Istanbul, we would get an impressive picture for the media. But strategically, it's much more valuable that the flame of memory burns everywhere. From east to west, from north to south, commemorative events have taken place all across Turkey. Circassian self-awareness is on the rise right now. It's no longer possible to suppress this process with administrative bans. In the coming years, this movement will only continue to grow. If we turn back to the homeland, I believe our compatriots made the most of the opportunities they had. People found the courage to take to the streets in Maykop, Cherkask, and Nalchik. They did everything humanly possible under conditions of total control. The situation in Nalchik, of course, was a special case. We all saw the video footage. There was a massive number of law enforcement officers in full gear, literally breathing down the participants' necks, closely monitoring every movement and word. People were deliberately put into a state of psychological stress. In such an atmosphere of total control, people were constrained in naturally expressing their emotions. When the authorities exert such unprecedented pressure on a peaceful morning event, people are deprived of the opportunity to openly experience their historical pain and to honor the memory of their ancestors in a human way. Everyone who stood there under the watchful eyes of the cameras surely had something to say, but this natural outlet for mental relief was shut off. And yet, even for the fact that the march took place under such suffocating conditions, we must express our immense gratitude to our brothers.
Speaking of the diaspora, I would like to especially mention Syria. The recent global changes in this country have led to major shifts. We are inspired to see our compatriots taken to the streets en masse with the national flag on Circassian Flag Day and on May 21st. Despite the enormous internal problems after years of war, hope for the future can be seen on the faces of our compatriots. Ilmis, you took a major trip to Syria and covered it in detail on social media. How are things going for them today? Can we say that things have gotten easier for them? As far as I know, including with the support of Circasfat, Circassian language teachers in Syria have had the opportunity to take professional development courses, which is critically important for preserving the language. Can these processes be seen as a tectonic shift toward a return to national identity? How do you see it?
Edemir, in recent times, I've visited Syria 3 or 4 times. I set myself the goal of visiting absolutely every surviving Circassian village and urban organization. We held dozens of in-depth meetings with leaders of charitable, humanitarian, and educational organizations. We discussed in detail the issues of the community's basic survival. Today, we have established close contacts between us and the diaspora in Syria. For example, for the celebration of Flag Day or the Day of Remembrance, they requested national clothing and flags from us. Of course, we help with such requests. The main thing I observed there, years of harsh pressure from the previous regime completely deprived them. The Circassians had no opportunity for legal self-expression. Their rights were practically reduced to zero. But today, against the backdrop of Syria's political transformation, people are finally starting to breathe more freely. A powerful process of decompression is underway. I'll go further. The mentality and institutional structure of our compatriots in Syria are in many ways better than the situation in Turkey. In Syria, Circassian Khasses have real agency, and their mentality is different from that of the Circassians in Turkey. All their infrastructure, buildings, and land plots are collectively owned by the community. When you visit any Circassian village, you see functioning schools and fully staffed teaching positions. Moreover, the Caucasus structures are actively engaged in legal entrepreneurship to ensure self-financing. For a while, this activity was interrupted, but now it is being rapidly restored. A huge advantage is that most of them speak and use their native language in everyday life. All the communities are closely connected to each other and operate on the principle of total mutual assistance. Of course, the new government in Syria is still seen by the population as a temporary bridge. During the large-scale restructuring of the state, it was extremely difficult and unsettling for people at first. Within the community, there was an understandable fear of uncertainty. For our part, we decided to make smart use of the close diplomatic channels between the Turkish and the new Syrian leadership. Before our trip, we officially notified the Turkish side, laying out in detail the situation and specifics of the local Circassians. We also raised the issue of the need to allocate fixed quotas for the Circassian minority in the future parliament of Syria. In addition, on site we organized direct official meetings between the leaders of the Syrian Khalitsa and representatives of the Turkish diplomatic corps. Thanks to this, a whole range of pressing issues was resolved quickly. At this stage, our cooperation is at a high level. Another important indicator, Syrian Circassians who have been seeking refuge from the war for years in Turkey have begun returning to their homeland en masse. And leading the way is the educated Circassian youth. This is a passionate generation with a strong Adagi spirit and a deep knowledge of their own history. Even now, they're becoming the driving force behind the country's revival. Some have received professional media education in journalism, while others have become engineers or managers. Upon returning, they immediately find their own niches. We continue to provide them with comprehensive support, helping them gain access to higher education in Turkey, and trying to assist those who wish to return to their historical homeland. Also, for example, for the second year in a row, we have organized a centralized celebration of Korban there. This year, more than 2.5 tons of festive meat were distributed directly to Circassian families in need. If it is the will of the Almighty, the Circassian Diaspora of Syria will fully return to the vanguard of the Circassian world. We are truly proud this year we saw this in Damascus, Aleppo, Cunedra, and in all Circassian enclaves. The Day of Remembrance was held at a fundamentally new, open level. By doing so, they're loudly declaring their history and sharing the truth about it, both with the new authorities and by broadcasting their position, in short, to the whole world.
The main meaning and benefit of mass street rallies with national flags I see in the fact that it is a vivid, powerful demonstration to the world. Our people, despite being forcibly scattered across the planet, have survived and function as a single living and indivisible organism. But the most important psychological effect, in my opinion, is directed inward, at ourselves. We show each other that there are many of us, that we are a large and strong nation. This gives a powerful boost of inspiration to those who have doubts.
That's true, Ademir. Let me repeat, this year has given us an emotional charge. We saw live demonstrations in Kavkame, Raikania, Vizhordania, and dozens of other places. It's a mistake to evaluate these processes solely through the lens of a single day of mourning. We see how internal work and national thought are finally becoming public. Those of our compatriots who are truly devoted to questions of self-identity are now seizing every opportunity to benefit their people, whether it's in matters of language or culture. As you rightly pointed out, right now in Syria, for example, there's a big wave of children wanting to learn their native Adige language. Such a spiritual awakening is simply impossible to measure with some earthly, material benefits.
Elmas, as part of this episode, I have to ask you one more question. It concerns the International Circassian Conference that took place in the Lithuanian parliament, in which you participated.
Just recently, a video went viral on social media where journalists approached the head of KFAD. They asked him to comment on your participation in this event. In his response in Turkish, the head of KFAD diplomatically avoided giving an assessment, saying that each organization may have its own vision of how to work. However, the interpreter, who was translating his words into Circassian, instead of simply doing his job, added a huge chunk of his own personal opinion. On behalf of the speaker, he announced that the conference in Lithuania was harmful for Circassians. In addition, he allowed himself to make absolutely unacceptable, in my opinion, offensive remarks about the Lithuanian people. I already brought up this topic in the previous episode, and many of our viewers are asking questions about this interpreter. First of all, is the identity of the interpreter known? And overall, how do you assess this situation? Yeah, I was a delegate at that conference in Vilnius. As for the reaction of the head of the department in Turkish, his response really was that everyone has their own perspective on the Circassian issue. Every organization has the right to act within its own strategy. There's nothing to comment on here. But let's look at things honestly. Within the walls of the parliament of an independent European state, Circassian delegates, scholars, and international experts from all over the world gathered to discuss an important issue: the recognition of the Circassian genocide. A serious, large-scale international conference took place. I believe that the head of the largest federation, which unites more than 50 organizations, simply cannot ignore events of this scale. It's necessary to clearly state your organization's position, whatever it may be. That's the first thing. Now, regarding the interpreter, we're very familiar with this character. At one time, he was part of the leadership. Kafet, he headed one of the Circassian Hases in Istanbul, and is part of those groups that have been exploiting the Circassian issue for years. This year, at the rally on May 21st, I paid special attention to this problem. In our diaspora, there are certain groups whose main function is the systematic discrediting of any genuine Circassian activism or organizations that try to show sincere concern for national issues, or simply to discredit those who don't cooperate with them. These people naively believe that Moscow will somehow reward them handsomely for this dirty work. This interpreter is a typical representative of that category. Taking advantage of the fact that the leader was speaking Turkish while the audience was listening to a Circassian translation, he tried to pass off his own personal propaganda, which he has in his head, as the official position of the Federation. He claimed that the Lithuanian people supposedly never did anything useful for the Circassians. He stated that the conference itself was a harmful event. You're just an interpreter. Your job is to translate the speaker's words literally, not to broadcast your own thoughts. But this person just grabbed the microphone and exposed what was really on his mind. And that's only what they allow themselves to say openly on the record. We regularly receive reports about the things these people do and the complaints they make when they visit their historical homeland. Believe me, what you just heard isn't even the worst of it. They openly slander us, accusing us of imaginary sins. Within these kinds of collaborationist groups, people are deprived of even the slightest right to independent thinking. They can't take a single step without strict control. Back home, for example, they deliberately spread rumors about our Circassian Federation, calling us extremists and trying to portray us as a force aimed at opposing Russia. Well, if this opposition means demanding that the law be followed, then it's actually beneficial. As I've said before, every official step we take, every appeal we make to the Russian authorities is well argued and entirely based on the Constitution of the Russian Federation. That's why all our actions are absolutely legal and legitimate. And here the question of historical truth arises. Let's go back to the facts. It has been 162 years since the end of the war in the Caucasus. There is still no official recognition of the Circassian genocide by Russia. Moreover, at the state level, they act as if there was never any tragedy at all between our peoples. The topic is glossed over in textbooks, but it's a huge layer of shared history between Russians and Circassians. We are obliged, once and for all, to clear this topic of opportunistic political speculation and bring complete historical clarity to it. Russia itself must determine the rightful place of this tragedy. There is simply no alternative to this path. If it doesn't happen today, it'll happen tomorrow. Until this knot is honestly untied, the Circassian question will stand before the Russian state for all time. How long can we keep pretending that the problem doesn't exist? Look around. Today, a new, educated generation of Circassians is growing up with a revived national spirit. Our global diaspora around the world numbers by various estimates up to 10 million people. Our historical pain can't simply be ignored. This need for justice must be fulfilled. If Moscow approached this issue strategically, with political maturity and democratic values, Circassians would be recognized as compatriots. The process of issuing passports and returning to the homeland would be simplified, and support would be given to our culture and language. In such a scenario, Russia would instantly gain a powerful, loyal, multi-million-strong diaspora all over the world. But instead, the authorities are trying to block this natural outlet for grief, constantly applying administrative pressure and attempting to portray an entire people as enemies. You can't keep an entire nation in enemy status forever. Sooner or later, Russia will inevitably have to return to this point. For both us and the Russians, this is an objective historical necessity. I said it many times. Let's open the archives and give a clear definition. We can't get by with vague phrases like those who died in the Caucasian War. For the Circassians, that's absolutely unacceptable. Take World War II, for example. We don't lump both sides together by calling the victims those who died in the German War, do we? It's impossible to even imagine a common day of remembrance for both the executioners and the victims of a tragedy. What was the Circassians' fault? Did the Adyghe attack Russia or pose any kind of existential threat to it? We lived freely and peacefully on our own land. If it weren't for this catastrophe, today we'd be a prosperous country with a population of millions. But now our people are torn apart and scattered all over the world. Millions of Adyghe were physically exterminated during the war and died during the deportation. It's unthinkable to put those who killed and expelled people on the same level as those who were killed and deprived of their homeland. What happened to the Circassians is officially called genocide. And this isn't just my personal opinion. First and foremost, this entire nightmare was described by the Russian military themselves at the time. That's why today, people in Russia know about what happened even better than we do. All the key archives, documents, and maps are at their disposal. What documents could we, the exiles, possibly have? The most important thing we have left is our living historical memory. From generation to generation, we pass down what happened to our ancestors, the hell they had to go through. But the legal evidence is in Russia's archives. That's why, for us, this tragedy is still an unburied past, a bleeding and unmourned wound. And until we jointly determine the rightful place for this issue, how can we move forward? Despite the refusal to acknowledge it, year after year we still reach out, calling on Moscow for dialogue. Mature nations find common ground through discussion, not their bans. But the foundation must be an honest analysis of the past. Open the archives and call things by their real names. If you show these archival documents to any unbiased person, even a child, they would clearly say, this was genocide. There is no one who could deny that, and if this historical fact is acknowledged, Russia itself will lose nothing. It won't become poorer, but for the Circassian people, it would be healing and a foundation for solving all current problems. Today, we're facing a real ethnocide. Wherever Circassians are, they're subjected every day to powerful waves of assimilation, rapidly losing their language and culture. Why is this happening? There's only one answer: because we have been deprived of our historical homeland. Any language and culture can truly thrive only on its own land. But today, Russia is turning the return of Circassians to the Caucasus into an artificial problem, putting up obstacles to repatriation. How have the Adyghe ever harmed Russia throughout our shared history? Our compatriots fought honorably on its front lines and helped strengthen the state. What danger from the Circassians, either in the past or the future, could anyone possibly be talking about? What are these fears and restrictions regarding returning home based on? These are completely irrational fears. Just look at the Circassian Diaspora there. We live in many countries, and everywhere the Adyghe are treated with great respect. In Turkey, it's hard to hear anything about the Circassians except genuine praise for their honesty and keeping their word. The same can be said about Jordan or Syria. When the modern Turkish Republic was being built, half of the army's officer corps and the state apparatus were Circassians, who were the first to go into battle for their new country. There is no country in the world that the Adyghe have ever harmed by their presence. If Russia had approached this issue with foresight, in a diplomatic way, aiming not to suppress the Circassians, but to gain a powerful strategic ally in them around the world, it would have brought enormous dividends to the Russian state in every sphere. Of course, because of the long-term consequences of the expulsion, today we are drained. Our language and culture are in a critical state. Is there any other indigenous people on Earth who are forced to humiliatingly beg for visas just to visit their homeland? The Caucasus is our homeland, our home, and this fact is well known, both around the world and within Russia itself. So, what are they afraid of? What threats do they keep talking about? Throughout its history, Russia has fought many large-scale wars with the Ottoman Empire, Japan, and European powers. Those conflicts have long been resolved and reflected upon, but for some reason, the Russo-Caucasian War seems endless in people's minds. Apparently, they recognize the strength of the Circassian spirit and are afraid that if Circassians return en masse, they'll take the Caucasus back. I'll be straightforward about how I see things. We live in the 21st century. The concepts have changed. Today is absolutely not the time to shout, let's go to war with Russia, let's take up arms and win back our land. We've entered an era of intellectual confrontation, of diplomatic and legal mechanisms. It's through these means that we need to look for ways out of crises, so that in the end we can achieve peaceful and equal coexistence. Look at the current war in Ukraine. It brings colossal, irreparable harm to both countries. Who is actually benefiting from this? The Circassians, more than anyone else on the planet, know all too well that in the fire of war, there is no good to be found for the people. Even now, a century and a half later, we are still dealing with the consequences of that military catastrophe. Besides, we have reason and are able to soberly compare resources. We can compare the scale of Russia with the capabilities of our fragmented people. That's why any radical militaristic scenarios will bring nothing to the Circassians except total destruction. That's obvious. However, the future is always unpredictable. Remember the collapse of the Soviet Union? Did those 15 republics break away from Moscow as a result of a bloody war with it? No. It was the result of tectonic geopolitical changes and democratic processes. That's why I don't rule out different scenarios. But no matter what happens, our main task today, both in the diaspora and at home, is simply to survive as a united people. We are obligated to preserve our native language, our culture, to know our history thoroughly, to keep the Circassian spirit and our mentality alive. We regularly hear reproaches like this. When you, over there in Turkey, speak out loudly on these topics, you put those living back home at risk. But what else can we do? Is everyone really supposed to just stay silent? If no one speaks the truth, how can we ever reach an understanding? You can't build a lasting peace on lies, falsehoods, and mistaken ideas. That's why, yes, we openly say that we need to find common ground with the Russians, just as much as they absolutely need to find common ground with us. We go out to the center of Istanbul and say it. We openly express our thoughts. We are absolutely open to dialogue. Let Moscow officially invite the diaspora leadership for a conversation. Let them ask questions about our positions, our view of the problems, and ways out of the deadlock. If an honest step is taken toward us, we will respond. Even if we can't reach an agreement on every point right away, we can find a compromise on some issues. And so, step by step, we will untangle this extremely complex historical knot. But the main problem today is that any expression of disagreement is being criminalized. A vivid example is the education reform, when the status of native languages in the republics was changed, moving them from mandatory subjects to electives. If you openly protest against this decision, you are instantly labeled an enemy of Russia. But if you silently go along with this reform, your language and your people simply disappear through assimilation. They tell us, let's not speak out, let's not offend Moscow. But this silence is killing us. How can you just stand by and enable your own destruction when it's happening right in front of everyone? Preserving your people is your direct duty and responsibility, and you need to have backbone to speak about this openly. We need to say, here are your own laws, and your actions directly contradict them. This violates international law regarding indigenous small-numbered peoples. We must learn to bring these issues to the level of direct, tough dialogue with Russia. And the most disgusting thing about this whole situation with language electives is that our own compatriots are at the forefront of these harmful processes. They sit in their chairs, obediently vote to destroy their native language, and then pin medals on themselves. They proudly pin medals to their chests. They think that Moscow has granted them great status and power for this. But the world doesn't work that way. Respect is not given to those who obediently sit on a short leash and are ready to carry out any order from above, but to those who have dignity. Respect is given to those who can firmly and convincingly defend the interests of their people. In big politics, people respect those who aren't afraid to speak the truth.
The conference in Lithuania that we're talking about is actually one of the legal tools within international law that allows us to bring our issues to the attention of the global community. If we're talking about the interest in the Circassian issue from various foreign countries, let me put the question bluntly, since this topic is so often used for speculation. Is it helpful or harmful to have this kind of geopolitical interest from third countries?
I'll be straight. No matter what motivates this interest, if it results in the official legal recognition of the genocide of our people, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Why should we be afraid of that? A tragedy happened to our people. That's a fact, and the world has the right to know about it and talk about it. These kinds of discussions always intensify when we start engaging with other countries, like Ukraine or before that, Georgia. People tell us, look, Georgia only recognized the Circassian genocide because it has a conflict with Russia. Or, you went to Lithuania, but Vilnius is in a fierce conflict with Moscow. As the Secretary General of the Circassian Federation, I honestly don't care about the hidden motives of Lithuanian or Ukrainian politicians. There's only one result that matters to me: widespread international recognition of the Circassian genocide by as many countries as possible. That is the direct benefit for the future of our people. Today, there are about 200 independent countries on the political map of the world. If 50 or 100 of them officially recognize the genocide, what could Russia possibly say in response? How would it try to prove that it never happened? A gun. Because both the world and Russia itself know perfectly well the Circassian genocide is an undeniable historical fact. That's why I don't really care about backroom games. I'm ready to go to any country, speak on any platform, and do everything in my power for this cause. A major conference was held in Lithuania, attended by delegates from many countries, including renowned scholars of international standing. All the speakers relied solely on historical facts and archival documents. If someone in Moscow has a different position or counter-arguments, there's no need to fight that with bans and threats. You need to know how to engage in civilized debate within the legal framework. Let Russia also publicly present its archival evidence that there was no genocide. Let them state their version of the truth. When they decide to do this, an open academic discussion will begin, which will inevitably lead to the truth in the end.
Frankly speaking, we still have a lot of topics left that we didn't have time to cover today. But let's not tire our viewers any further. We will definitely return to discussing these issues in our upcoming episodes. To wrap up, even though this is a big topic on its own, let's briefly touch on your vision for the future. Recently, you officially announced the creation of a new international association made up of Circassian organizations from different countries around the world. What are your immediate practical goals? What is your strategy? And what systemic work do the Circassians need today, in addition to all of the above?
Let's go to peace. The time in which we find ourselves today is amazing and turning point. Our youth all over the world is rapidly growing with a Circassian core. Soul. This gives tremendous inspiration. Will we personally see the final result of our struggle in our lifetime? I don't know. But it is our duty to fulfill our responsibilities here and now so that if not us, then the next generations will see this result. I deeply believe in our future. This powerful rise in national self-awareness gives me tremendous hope. It seems to me that the era of empty, endless conversations and mutual reproaches in the Circassian movement is finally coming to an end. A time for concrete, decisive steps is coming. It's time for action. We have managed to accomplish the most important thing, to preserve our identity and Circassian spirit through a century and a half of exile. Now, our future doesn't depend on whether the leaders of the cases like each other or not. Today, Circassian organizations simply have no other alternative but to come to an agreement and coordinate their efforts. Just look at the Day of Remembrance on May 21st, for example. If, in Turkey alone, absolutely all Circassian federations come together as a united front, I am absolutely certain that we could bring 1 million or more people out onto the streets in a single day. And that time is rapidly approaching. It is absolutely vital for us to throw away all these petty squabbles, behind-the-scenes intrigues, and gossip. It's time for open action. I have one big dream: to convey to every Circassian the importance of gathering 3 to 5 million personally signed petitions to Russia demanding that we be recognized as compatriots. This is an absolutely achievable goal. But it's time for us to raise the level of our organizational work to a whole new height. We must make all the processes and results of our activities absolutely public, open, and transparent. This is what the present demands. Look, today we discussed Syria in detail. Thank God. There, the community has awakened and is showing incredible resilience. The same thing's happening in Jordan, Turkey, and the Caucasus. We have entered an era of total network integration and global Circassian cooperation. Personally, on my own behalf and on behalf of our Circassian Federation, I openly declare we have no intention of being hostile toward anyone in the Circassian world, and we are not hostile. All past grievances, disagreements, and prejudices that have held us back for years must finally be set aside. If there is even the slightest opportunity for joint work in the interests of our nation, our hands are extended, we are open. And all other organizations should take the same approach, because our people have every reason to demand that we unite our efforts. The time for behind-the-scenes ambitions is over. Now is the time to work for the good of our people. And if our generation of leaders doesn't find the strength to do this, our youth will carry out this process. I watch them with admiration. Young activists of the new generation interact calmly and effectively with all organizations. This generation has an innate ability for horizontal cooperation. By the way, back in the day, we started building a great constructive dialogue with CAFEFT under their previous leadership, and together we carried out many useful projects. Unfortunately, the new leadership of this federation decided to close all doors to dialogue, but that won't stop us. We still won't get tired of looking for ways to reach an agreement, of extending a hand for joint work, because our common cause is more important than personal grievances.
Yılmaz, I want to sincerely thank you for being a guest on today's show and for so openly sharing your thoughts with our audience.
Thank you so much as well, Edamir. God willing, our intentions are pure and our future is open. What's on our minds is what we say, and we will continue to confidently follow our own path. On this difficult journey, it's critically important for us to be sensitive to the feelings of ordinary people, not to push anyone away because of differences in views, but to strive to unite and help each other. That is where the highest value lies. May the Almighty protect and preserve the Adigi people.
Varabi Sobor. Varabi Sobor. Thank you, Yılmaz. I also want to express my deep gratitude to all our viewers. Be sure to write your thoughts and questions in the comments and join the discussion.
Adamir, maybe you'll cut this part out during editing, but I still want to share a historical analogy. There was a long period in Turkey's history when performing national songs was strictly forbidden at the state level. Musicians weren't given a single chance to get on television or radio. However, those artists who, despite the bans, kept singing for their people and their native language eventually became much more popular and influential. They became more popular than those who had round-the-clock access to state TV channels. Why? Because the people's hearts unfailingly accept and support only sincerity and truth. When you do honest work in the interest of the nation, people notice it. I closely follow the work of your channel, Adamir, and I fully understand your independent stance. Those figures who are afraid to come on your broadcasts privately justify it by saying that your channel supposedly opposes Russia. They worry, if we show up on his platform, how will people in the offices look at us afterward? I want to say that if we keep hiding and don't openly discuss our problems, we'll never be able to find a solution. As the Circassian proverb says, 2 hands only get to know each other when they wash each other. Regular contact, discussions, and meetings are absolutely essential. Whether someone likes another person's work or not is a matter of personal opinion. But it should be evaluated in an honest, open, and public discussion, not behind someone's back. And all these artificial divisions into communists, fascists, radicals, and other labels are destructive. We have no right today to write people off. All addicts around the world, regardless of their current political, ideological, or religious views, are one indivisible people. And this understanding should become the unshakable foundation of our strategy.
These are exactly the core values we talk about on this channel. I just have to jump in here with my own comment, Yılmaz. The most paradoxical and amusing thing about this whole story is this. Despite all the attempts to portray our platform as a destructive and extremist force in the eyes of the Circassian community, Russia itself still does not see us that way. It would be a relief for many if we were labeled as enemies, and a lot of effort is being put into making that happen. So either they're just not doing their job well enough and need to try harder, or it's time to show some maturity and start a conversation.
I constantly watch your shows, Adamir, analyze the content, and listen carefully to your arguments. I think it wouldn't hurt those people to listen to your episodes carefully and without bias, too. If they see some mistake in what you say, they should reach out to you and say, Adamir, here's where your conclusions are wrong. Let's talk about it. Isn't that how the process should work? That's exactly why, throughout this whole interview, I've been talking about the necessity of dialogue. But this approach, when you label people from afar and don't engage with them, that's the wrong way to go about it. That's a dead-end path that shows weakness.
Everyone has the right to make mistakes. Today, you emphasize the importance of dialogue. Only through deep discussion can pure truth emerge. That's how the modern world works. The strong have conversations.
Of course, the right to make mistakes is an inherent part of human nature. And the one who makes the most mistakes is usually the person who arrogantly believes they're absolutely infallible. This reminds me of the profound words of a remarkable scientist. When he was older, someone asked him, "Sir, you've studied in many countries around the world and graduated from prestigious universities. What is the most important thing you've learned in your life?" He answered very simply, "After all these years, I finally learned and understood who I really am." We all have to go through this journey, overcome our inner dead ends, and fully realize ourselves.
Hamıra psoilmez.
Amen.